And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Top Dog Talk podcast. I am your host, Harrison Reno. Alongside me, Dan Kiley. Dan, Tuesday night, December 13th at 7:31. We are like 25 seconds late tonight, so I apologize about that. But hey, we are here. It's the Top Dog Talk podcast, episode number 68, a Georgia football year review. But before we get to that, we do have some big news around college football that has taken college football and the world by storm. Now, it's a bad storm because we lost college football as a whole, lost a really big figure, at least in my mind. Someone who I think should be in the Hall of Fame, but due to the qualifications and that whole process, won't get in because he didn't win 60% of his games. But hey, we'll get to that when we get to that. Hopefully, we can see an exception made for him. Mike Leach passed away, I believe it was early this morning, had a heart condition, personal health emergency, which was a heart condition that took his life. And I believe he got hospitalized over the weekend. And, you know, what a guy was. Great football coach. I was actually reading, I went back and watched an old 60-minute interview they did with him back in, I believe it was 08, right after Texas Tech upset, number one Texas. He was supposed to be a lawyer, Dan. He never played, never played college football, but rose up the ranks, came up with, this whole offense, this whole air raid system, developed it, enhanced it, wherever he went, took it wherever he was, and ran it at a high level despite having what they said, half the budget and half the talent level of those around him. And, to me, he should be in the Hall of Fame just because of that, because of what he did and the impact he had at each one of his stops. And, we were talking about on the phone today, Dan. He had a quote-unquote oddball personality. He was different. He was unique from everybody else, but it perfectly matched his offense. His football was different. It was odd. But now it's taken over.
Well, you're right. When you say he should be in the Hall of Fame, they have different categories of people in the Hall of Fame. Obviously, he's a coach, but he's also a contributor, right? He single-handedly helped create. Well, he's not the only one. Hal Mummy was also involved, but they created the air raid offense, which is taking over college football in mass. I mean, it's even spread its way to the NFL, where you have teams throwing it, 60, 70, 80% of the time and running it hardly at all. Run pass first, run second type thing. And he's really the innovator, one of the innovators for that. And he really elevated it to a higher level and really proved that you could win big boy football using that offense. And obviously we've seen it go everywhere. I mean, for gosh sakes, Georgia was an I formation fullback type offense. And, we brought in Monken to help open it up and bring in facets of the air raid. Now, is Georgia a complete air raid? No, they're not, but they are running a lot of the schematics, the bits and pieces of it. I mean, it's even made its way to Alabama. Nick Saban was a stick in the mud, and he was going to do the same thing that Kirby did and when Georgia did for the longest time, which was SEC football, which is run it down your throat and play big boy football, as Rude says. And that's absolutely correct. Big boy football, right? But he brought it in, and he was such a great personality. And I'm on the record a million times. You can go back to any one of our shows that we talked about Mike Leach, and I am a huge Mike Leach fan. I know he wasn't as beloved as some of the other people. I understand he didn't win at the same level that a lot of other guys can. And I do know that he rubbed some people the wrong way. Some people thought he was a gimmick. Some people thought he was all for show, because he was silly. He had fun. I mean, he was into odd things. He thought Bigfoot was real. He's a big pirate person. All of those things, but just an absolute shame. It really devastating, and it broke my heart when I heard the news that he was airlifted. I think that came out Sunday. I'm pretty sure it came out Sunday, and then he ends up passing away on Monday. It just truly sad. The world is a lesser place without him in it, because he brought a lot of joy to a lot of different people. And I, for one, enjoyed every time he got in front of a microphone.
Absolutely. And, he's leaving a huge impact behind. I know everybody says it, but I mean, it's true. It rings true even now. 61, gone way too soon. Way too soon. Should have had 10 more years of coaching. could have coached for a long time, I believe. But it was just, it happened. It sucks that we lost him, but look what he's leaving behind, Dan. I looked this up because I saw it earlier today. Credit to Fox Sports for this graphic, but look at the coaching tree. Look who he's influenced. Dave Aranda, coach of Baylor. Neil Brown, Sonny Cumbie, Sonny Dykes, Josh Heupel, Lincoln Riley, Cliff Kingsbury, Dana Holgerson. I mean, that's a pretty damn good coaching tree right there. Really damn good coaching tree right there. And he's leaving behind, a lot of people that are going to run some similar things to what he did. I don't think all these people run, his stuff, but they all have their own way of creating and adding on to what Mike Leach provided to the game, which is the air raid offense. I mean, Josh Heupel took the SEC by storm this year, and just his second year at Tennessee. We talked about it all off season. He was, we thought Tennessee was going to be a good team this year, and they were. They proved to be a good team. Granted, they fell off towards the end, but got to give a lot of credit to Josh Heupel and that offense, which is, I would say, like a son of Mike Leach's offense. So with that being said, Dan, let's hop into our Mike Leach influenced hot topics of the night, a little tribute to him. Dan, first one. What is your favorite Mike Leach moment/story?
So I think there's so many to choose from, and there was one that I shot in a group text to you guys. I think one of the cool stories about Mike Leach was there was a player on Mike Leach's team, and he told this player that you're not going to play. Not hardly at all, if at all, you're not going to play. So he's like, I highly recommend you get into coaching. And this player stormed out of his office because he was so pissed off that he was told he wasn't going to play, and that somebody had the audacity to recommend him get into coaching. Well, the next day he comes back, takes a job, becomes a GA, and that player was Lincoln Riley. And so without that, you don't have Lincoln Riley today. So from a legacy standpoint, you got stuff like that. But some of the stories, like one that instantly came to mind, one of the funniest ones ever was he told the players something about your little fat girlfriends. Like, I mean, it's just talking about, focusing on football and quit worrying about your little fat girlfriends. And that was hilarious. But the one, and then obviously the Bigfoot stories and stuff like that. But the one that got me, and I'm going to read this because I don't want to mess it up. It's hilarious. He was asked when he was coaching at Washington State, what is the most dangerous Pac-10 mascot? And so he, in true Mike Leach fashion, he goes through all of them. He's like, Arizona, I'm going to say the Wildcat is out. USC, the Trojan, he does have a horse, but is he on foot? Does he have a bow and arrow or just a sword? The Bruin, definitely formidable. Cal, and it's another bear. The tree, yeah, but you could chop a tree down. Oregon, the duck would lose interest and fly away and get out of there, which might actually be good advice given the circumstances. Washington, Husky has no chance. Oregon State, the Beaver, we'll see how long that Beaver can hold its breath. The Utah Ute, he said, well, we're back to it. Is he on horseback? Does he have a bow? Does he have an arrow? Did he make a trade for a rifle? Because if he has a rifle, then he can probably cause some problems. Arizona State, you're probably going to have to get somebody who knows about Harry Potter to talk about how you kill a sun devil, because there's a lot of stuff around that. Colorado, just for the beast alone, the Buffaloes can be pretty hard to tangle with. And then Washington State, Butch the Cougar, is going to have a clear mind and be crafty, but he could definitely find a way. But I'm going to go with the Arizona State Sun Devil. I mean, this is a press conference with a college coach, and this is what he's doing. And I mean, that's one of the reasons that I absolutely love Mike Leach. He's just that guy. He's hilarious. And, I mean, I know how intelligent he is. I know he was a lawyer. I get all that. So I know that he knows he's playing to the crowd, but I just love the fact that he was willing to do it. And that's one of the things I'm going to miss about him. That's one of the things that I've always hated about Kirby and Nick Saban, is how they just seem so angry to talk to people. And Mike Leach was the opposite. He seemed like the guy that you would want to go sit around and have a couple beers with and just listen to stories. And he's just an amazing personality, and I'm going to miss him tremendously.
Dan, my stories, my favorite story of Mike Leach is a little different. It is probably, well, I don't know how many people have seen it. I'm going to put it, there's a YouTube video on it. Really great. We watched it today to make sure I had the story to a T. He was a coach at Oklahoma years back in like it was the 1990s. And for the Oklahoma-Texas game, I don't know exactly what his title was. I don't know if he was the OC back then, but it was back with Bob Stoops. They were playing Texas, and he decided he wanted to come up with a fake play script. And his whole plan of this was to drop a fake play script, was to come up with it just to, quote unquote, lose it at the game and hope Texas staff member, Texas player would pick it up and actually believe it was true. So Mike Leach came up with this whole play script and based these plays that he put on the play script as the opposite, going the opposite direction, opposite formation of where they actually wanted the play to go. One of them was a reverse pitch. And on that reverse pitch, it was like the second play on the play sheet. Just so happened, Texas, a Texas GA found it, picked it up, took it to the defensive coordinator, and when they, I think OU went up 17-0, they said, before the Texas defensive coordinator at the time threw it out and decided, it was a fake. Well, just so happens to be, Dan, that Texas GA was Tom Herman. Crazy as can be, Tom Herman was the graduate assistant on that Texas staff that picked up that fake play script, used it, gave it to, his defensive coordinator, gave it to the staff members for them to use to try and, get an advantage on Oklahoma when, hey, they didn't even know that, it was Mike Leach trying to get an advantage over them. So sadly for Mike Leach, it didn't turn out as Texas still won that football game. But that was, it's genius. It was great moment, great story. Just wish, we had something like that in modern times because, hey, in modern times, if that were to happen and some, phantom play sheet were to end up on the field and your opponent was supposed to get it, I don't even think any coordinator or any coach would even look at it for more than a few seconds before they would say, yeah, this is too good to be true. But hey, back then, anything was possible. And Texas thought they were getting one up on Oklahoma. Dan, second hot topic of tonight. Who is your favorite college football, quote unquote, oddball personality? Player, coach, who is it?
So this one's tougher than I thought it was going to be because my go-to was always Mike Leach. But outside of Mike Leach, I think Lane Kiffin comes to mind. And, is he an oddball? Is he not an oddball? I'm not 100% sure, but he plays to the media as much as Leach, and he one of my favorites for that reason and that reason alone. And I like him, but I think you're going to have to go back to like Irk Russell. Irk Russell for University of Georgia was just a crazy guy. Like, so one of my high school coaches is a guy named Dennis Watson, Coach Watson, and he would tell the stories all the time about all the crazy stuff that Irk Russell would do. He would run into the locker room. He would smash his head up against lockers. He would headbutt players, blood coming down his face. Just a crazy guy, but he was a beloved guy by everybody that ever played for him. All the coaches, all those people, they speak ravingly about him. He wasn't the run-of-the-mill coach. He was a little bit different. He was kind of an oddball, but he was an amazing football coach, and his players loved him. And, there's not really been another like Irk Russell that I can remember. I don't know. This one was tougher for me than I thought, Harrison, because like if you expanded outside of it, I think Bob Uecker would be the winner. By far, Bob Uecker would be the winner. But just inside of college football, I think, like I said, I like Lane Kiffin. I don't know if he qualifies, so I guess I'm going to pick Irk Russell. Who do you got?
I don't know if this qualifies either because it's kind of similar to Lane Kiffin in a way. Also, funny enough, similar to Dan Mullen, just because they coach at the same place. Steve Spurrier. Steve Spurrier has been a great one. Great personality. I was told a story about Steve Spurrier said something about, he was asked at, I guess it was some media day, when Peyton Manning decided to come back for his senior year, they asked Spurrier, hey, what do you think about that? And he said something along the lines of, well, that's great for them. They should go win another Orange Bowl. Supposed to be taking a shot at Tennessee. And I'm like, hey, Spurrier, that's a great personality. The old ball coach. pretty damn good player in his time and turned out to be a pretty damn good coach. Sucked that, things kind of ended the way they did at South Carolina. But hey, Beamer ball's in full effect there. We will touch on the transfer portal tonight at some point. It's not on the show notes, but I do have some questions that I want to talk over with Dan because, heck, there's some interesting things going on in the transfer portal in college football. So, guys, let us know in the comments, who your favorite oddball personality is. Or, hey, if you got a Mike Leach moment or story you want to share, go ahead and put it in here because I'm sure there are a ton of them. As you can see, Dan couldn't pick one. Dan had to pick out two right there because, hey, there's so many.
Steve Spurrier. Steve Spurrier was a great one by you. I mean, his one-liners and like the fact that when he got to the NFL, he said he was going to make the Dallas Cowboys his Georgia Bulldogs. They asked Steve Spurrier about playing Georgia the second week of the season. He said it's great because they usually have half their team suspended.
Oh my God!
He was just he was just absolutely great. And they asked him about that last year or whatever about not going well, and he walked away from me and he said, well. He said, if I'm going to get beat that bad, it might as well be on the golf course. Steve Spurrier was hilarious. Listen, you're supposed to hate Steve Spurrier as a Georgia fan, but I love Steve Spurrier. He's great. And I loved I understood he was taking shots at Georgia. I got it, but at the same time, he was hilarious. So, the old quote, they asked him, Steve Spurrier, I want to say it was against Georgia, but I'm not sure. But he was up really big at the end of the game, and he went for two. And they asked him, Steve, why did you go for two? And he said, because I couldn't go for three. So, I love Steve Spurrier. That was a great one by you. I don't know how I didn't pick that one, but I'm glad you did.
With that being said, Dan, it is time for your rants of the week. It has also been the rant of the week for many because my boy Dan got to call a state championship game this past weekend. Dan, first off, before we get into your rant, tell us about how the game went. How was the experience?
So it was really cool. The game was at I think it's called City Park Field now, or I have no idea. The old Turner Field where Georgia State plays is where the game was at. They took you upstairs. It's kind of tough getting in at the beginning because like nobody kind of knew. They had to go in every which way, but we finally got in and went up the elevator. We got to walk through the concourse, sat in the press area where all the different tables and stuff are while we were waiting for our booth to open up. Got inside. It was pretty stinky cool knowing that I was sitting at the same table, desk, whatever you want to call it, that like Skip and Pete used to call Braves games from. If you're anywhere close to my age and you grew up an Atlanta Braves fan, especially when they were on TV and stuff like that. But I remember so many times going to bed at night with the radio on real quiet so my parents didn't hear it, and I would listen to Skip and Pete do the game. And to know that I was sitting at that same table was pretty stinking cool. And then the game itself, it was great. I hate the fact that it was raining. I would have loved to seen what those teams were able to do with a dry football in perfect conditions. And I'm sure the Cedartown people will tell you the same thing because rain really affected that football game. Cedartown lost. They couldn't win it. But it was an amazing game. Gainesville played one hell of a football game. Langston Hughes has been scoring over 40 points on everybody, beating everybody by 50, 60 points, broke the record for the most points in a season by a high school team. And Langston Hughes did win the football game 35-28, but it was an amazing football game. Came down to a third down, and the quarterback for Langston Hughes, Aaron Nolan, made just an outstanding instinctual play to get a first down. So it was an amazing opportunity. It was in 13 years calling high school football. It was the first time I got to call a state championship game. So it was pretty awesome, Harrison.
And what about that rant of the week, sir?
Okay, so my rant of the week has just lost all of its steam. I had a perfect rant, and it just lost all of its steam. I was going to tell you how ridiculous it is that the Atlanta Falcons wanted $600,000 to host the state championship games inside of their Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And that, I know it's just coincidence, but the last 3 years it's rained during the state championship weekend. So these kids and these families that travel all the way up here have to sit out in the pouring rain. Even during the Gainesville game, in the Cedartown. Well, the Cedartown fans, by the way, Cedartown fans are tough. They were sitting in the stands getting just pounded by pouring rain. I mean, it was a torrential downpour and they didn't budge. But like the Gainesville game, everybody was standing under the awnings trying to stay dry. So there was really nobody in the lower bowl for the game. And like I said, the weather 100% affected that football game. And, it wasn't just my opinion. I mean, our buddy Brooks, Rusty Mansell, Rodney Nabalsi. I mean, all of these guys that cover high school football and recruiting, we're just talking about how ridiculous it is to have this game in the weather when you have an opportunity to play in a dome stadium less than 2 miles away from where we were playing. And just the greed in itself. And I understand that it does cost money to run it, but I mean, give back to the community that's given so much to you, Arthur Blank. I mean, we paid for the damn stadium, dude. Like, come on. Like, I just get so frustrated when taxpayer money goes to building something like the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and then they do not allow. It was just ridiculous. But like I said, I had so much juice for this. I was so angry about it, and like he wanted $600,000 to run it, to host the games. But then his stadium just sat empty the entire time. And that's where the real cruelty of it comes in. If he had scheduled another event, right? Like let's say Britney Spears is performing or something. I don't know. I'm just making something up. Taylor Swift, T-Swizzle. She's over there at Mercedes-Benz performing. I get it, because no way, shape, or form can a high school game produce the amount of revenue that a T-Swizzle could, right? So I got you. But when it just sits there empty, it just, we always come back to it. At the end of the day, the adults ruin everything for the kids. And this is just a prime example of that. However, my argument, all of this has lost all of its juice because the Atlanta Falcons and the GHSA have announced that on Thursday they will have a press conference to make a special announcement, which everybody knows that the game will be moving back to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I don't know when. My assumption would be that it's going to go back this year, this coming season, which is great. If that's the truth, if that's exactly what's going to happen, that's amazing. I think Arthur Blank caught so many strays in this argument. I mean, listen, when I tell you it was every media member, it wasn't like nobody was taking a side. Harrison, nobody was. It was just shot after shot after shot after shot. Brooks had that video where he was standing in the torrential downpour. That was during the Cedartown game, by the way. And he was 100% right. It's and so many fake tough guys were in his comments, and I was reading through the comments talking about games are played in elements, Brooks. You gotta grow up. Like, man, shut up. Like, up in Rabun County, we play in cold weather. Like, shut up. I mean, it's a great opportunity for these kids to have a lifelong memory. First of all, playing the state championship is memory making to begin with, but then to cap it off by playing in a professional stadium. I mean, arguably one of the most beautiful stadiums in the world.
Once in a lifetime moment for majority of those kids. 95, 98%, right? I mean,
we're saying it's like less than 5% of the kids go on to play college football. So what are we talking? We're talking about the 95%. We're talking about the masses. They work so hard. Why would you not reward them? I understand that the game is meant to be played in elements. That's fine. But what about the fans that drive? I mean, you have fans coming from South Georgia that are driving 4 hours, 3 hours to get to the game. Do you think they want to come sit in the game and sit in freezing cold weather and get poured on? No, they'll stay home and watch it on TV. And they did. A lot of the teams didn't have big crowds because they didn't want to sit in the weather, and they watched it on TV because it's a televised game. So I don't know. I'm glad if Thursday is the announcement that we all expect, then I am glad they listened. And for the first time in forever, the Falcons read the room the right way.
So with that being said, Dan, it's time to get into the year in review. What a year it's been. Georgia, I guess it's what? Well, they won it in 2022, so we're going to start from there. Dan, Georgia beats Michigan New Year's Eve. Beats Michigan. Absolute beat down. I know that felt good for you because, hey, you got family that are Michigan fans. And go into Indianapolis. You beat Alabama. finally get over that hump, 33-18. Nobody's going to forget that. No Georgia fan will forget that. And hey, they're going to make sure Alabama fans don't forget that. Then fast forward a few months later, Georgia has 15 players drafted to the NFL, 5 first-round draft picks. You have multiple other players that enter and leave campus, leave the school via the portal. Meanwhile, Georgia brings in, I believe it was the number 3 recruiting class in the nation, and doesn't bring a single player. Not a single player comes in via the portal. I don't know how many other teams can say that. I don't know if there's a single team that is in the college football playoff right now that can say they didn't bring a single player through the transfer portal this offseason. Georgia goes on to beat Oregon 49-3 in the season opener. Me and Dan were just as shocked as everybody else that Georgia blew out Oregon in that fashion. And then Georgia goes on. You have another undefeated regular season, 12-0. Had some really big wins over Tennessee, Oregon, just 2 off the top of my head, 2 really big wins. Beat multiple ranked teams throughout the season. Your win over South Carolina ended up looking pretty damn good, considering South Carolina knocked off Tennessee, and knocked off Clemson there. Go win the SEC championship, Dan, 50-30 over LSU, number 1 seed in the college football playoff. And now Kirby Smart has a chance to repeat as the national champion. Will be the first time that we've had a repeat champion in college football since Alabama did it. Dan, we talked about it over the phone, why we wanted to do this, why we wanted to review the year. That was a quick recap right there. Because nobody expected, I don't think it was realistic to expect anybody to think that Georgia would just run their way through the regular season, would, make it all the way back to where they were a year ago today, and, do it in pretty good fashion. I know it wasn't as dominant as people would have expected for a, potential repeat champion to look, but hey, in college football today, we have parity, or quote-unquote parity, quote-unquote level playing field that people have wanted for so many years. Dan, what's been your biggest takeaway this season?
Coming into the season, we talked about how losing the amount of talent that Georgia lost, how it would be almost impossible to repeat as a champion, and how they have tons of talent on that roster, but there were so many guys that were going to be learning. To say that they were going to go undefeated seemed like it was going to be tough, right? It was just going to be tough. And it wasn't, I will agree, I will acquiesce to the masses that the schedule did line up. But the way that they came out and performed against Oregon completely blew my mind. I had no idea that we were going to be able to do that in the very first game. I thought it was going to take, in my mind, I thought that this season was going to be kind of like a ramp, where we started out slow, maybe got some ugly wins at the beginning of the season, but then as the season went on, we got better and better because a lot of those young players were going to start getting some games under the belt, and the adjustments would be made by the coaching staff. So to see them come out on fire and perform, I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect game, but that was as damn close to a perfect game as you could possibly get. And for them to start with that, and I think because they started so well, that they were almost a victim of their own success, because everybody saw what they did for Oregon and they expected that and more as the season went on. Now, I will tell you, as somebody who has played football, and I'm sure almost everybody who's played, sometimes you have those where you play so well and you can't really put your finger on it exactly why it is, and you can never kind of really repeat that performance, even though you try so hard. Very difficult to repeat and be as good as you were that day. But I mean, with everything that they lost, and but am I here? You good, Harrison? You hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up just a little bit. I didn't know if it was on my end or on your end.
Go ahead, take over.
You're good? Okay. Yeah, so kind of like Dan was saying, for them to come out and basically, have a crescendo at the beginning of the year against Oregon. And, basically, I mean, shoot, the Oregon game kind of set the trend for the games to come, and I think it kind of set the expectations really high. Stetson kind of showed in that first game that he could, as Root said, get into the Heisman race, and he was in the Heisman race. I know he finished fourth, and people are going to want to point that out that aren't Georgia fans. But, for Georgia to play so good, to play that, as Dan said, quote, perfect game from the start, pretty damn, impressive, considering you lost what you lost. I think they lost over 20 players via the draft and the portal combined. Really, really impressive start there. And I know Dan said, hey, it was a ramp. It was kind of like a ramp. And I agree. We expect it to be a ramp. But I do want to bring up the point. I think it was also kind of, I think it still was a ramp, Dan. I think you started from the very top. And, maybe it was a little roller coaster ride because you had the game against Missouri where you didn't play well at all. You didn't play well. Got down, actually had to overcome a deficit, had to, flex that composure, that adversity card, as Kirby Smart calls it. They came back to win that game. Then you play two really tough games in the elements. Tennessee, which you below Tennessee away via the eye test. The final score did not reflect that game. Can't box scores tout that. Kentucky, very cold weather. Georgia did what they needed to win. I think that's the biggest thing, Dan, is you go look at what Todd Monken said in his Broyles Award speech. He said they did what they needed to win. That was what they did. They just did what they needed to win, and they got the hell out of wherever they were. And, I mean, it's impressive. I know it was frustrating week to week to see Georgia team go and put up 49 points and then come back the next week and you only put up 20 or 30 points. And it was just running the ball, for the most part. I know it's frustrating to watch when you have that crescendo so early in the year, and then a few weeks later you kind of drop a ball in the next few weeks to come, next games to come. So I understand that frustration, but heck, you get an SEC championship, you go undefeated, and somehow, some way, you're going to play one of the best teams in the country in the college football playoffs, first round against Ohio State. And Dan, I don't know if I am out there to say this, but to me, Georgia Ohio State is kind of basically the national championship. Winner of this game, I have no doubt in my mind, will have the upper hand against either of the team that comes out from the TCU Michigan matchup. No disrespect to them, but Georgia beats Ohio State. I don't see a team in the playoffs that beat Georgia. And if Ohio State beats Georgia, heck, who says they can't go beat Michigan in a rematch?
Yeah, I think it is a de facto national championship, except for some reason I think Michigan has Ohio State's number right now. So I don't know. I think if Ohio State were to beat Georgia, I think Michigan still has a real good chance of beating them, which would get wacky Jim Harbaugh a national championship, which I'm not a fan of. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a great game, Harrison. And, I think we match up really, really well with them. And you're right. It could be a de facto national championship. And I wanted to play USC. I just thought that would be super cool to play USC, but we haven't in my lifetime. I don't think we've ever played Ohio State. So, I mean, it's gonna be cool. It's gonna be awesome. I mean, you saw how much those tickets are going for. So,
yeah. And Jonathan Williams says in the comments, I almost called him another name. He's gonna get mad at me for that. But hey, I didn't say it. I almost called him Jeremiah. Shout out Jeremiah Stoddard, who I've not seen in the comment section. So Jeremiah, if you're out there, we appreciate you, bud. I think it is if Georgia beats Ohio State, I think TCU or Michigan would challenge Ohio State. See, that's interesting. I was impressed with Max Duggan. And, I mean, shoot, those last few drives he had in that Big 12 championship alone probably could have won him the Heisman. I thought, to me, after watching that, I was like, okay, well, my vote would be Max Duggan. That was before I saw Stetson Bennett was a finalist. And I know Caleb Williams won it, and congrats to him. Had a great year. Me and Dan have talked about it before. Caleb Williams is an amazing prospect, amazing QB. Going to be probably the number one overall pick next year. But shoot, what Max Duggan did in that last few minutes of that Kansas State game was impressive. Was as impressive as a quarterback performance I've seen in a loss in a long time. So I just don't know. Does TCU have the talent to challenge Ohio State? Probably not, if you had to ask me. But this game isn't played on paper, as we all know. So it's tough. I can definitely see Michigan challenging Ohio State. We've already seen Michigan beat Ohio State, and as Dan said, yeah, it looks like they have their number right now. And I think, to me, I mean, Ohio State Michigan would be a great game in a rematch. I think Ohio State would be pumped. They would be ready to play. Also have that revenge factor, but shoot,
Well,
I
I'll
want to
tell
see
you this.
Georgia Michigan.
I'll tell you this right now. If it's Michigan Ohio State for the national championship, that will break every TV record ever, because that game, for whatever reason, I mean, obviously it's called The Game, and the numbers on The Game are far surpass anything else. I mean, those numbers are through the roof, and everybody watches. I mean, that Georgia versus Michigan is not going to be a big TV number, because everybody's already, well, in most people's mind, they've already seen that game, right? Georgia versus TCU would not do anything. TCU versus Ohio State wouldn't do a big number. I'm out of, like, and this is something you have to worry about as a Georgia fan when you think about officiating and how this game is going to go. Is we said it a million times. You can call me a conspiracy theorist if you want to. College football is a TV product, and they are going to do whatever they can do to get the biggest TV number. And the biggest TV number is Ohio State, Michigan. And if you think I'm wrong, that's your opinion, but you're wrong. That is the biggest TV number that they could possibly do. So that's going to be in the back of my mind. The first sketchy call that comes up in the game, I'm going to be like, I told you. Ah!
Oh my gosh! Pray for Jeremiah, Jonathan, and I in the comment and our text group chat.
Mute me and just ignore me till the end of the game, and just be like, "Oh, just watching the game. You can't be bothered while I'm watching the game." Shut up.
It's gonna be great. I'm excited for the Georgia Ohio State game. I'm excited for Michigan TCU. God, what an upset that would be! TCU upsets Michigan. You know, Dad, I was listening to I don't remember what show it was, but yeah. Episode 69 next week, guys. I know you're excited for it. Me and Dan have great plans for that show. I believe we're going to do some, like, quote-unquote bowl mania talk over there, talking about some bowl games.
Episode 69, I'll do it upside down for you, Rudes.
Oh, that just derailed the whole segment. But yeah, I mean, Gonna be great. Dan, we do have some more things to discuss. A few more bullet points I want to go over. So first up, before we get to offensive, defensive, some player of the year awards, I want to talk about two things. Buster Faulkner, quality control coach. Oh God. Quality control coach for Georgia, accepted the offense coordinating job at Georgia Tech. Took me by surprise. When I texted the group chat, everyone said, yeah, that's old news. I'm like, well, shoot, I didn't see that. So I didn't think this was coming, Dan, because all we've talked about, all everybody's talked about for the last few years has been Buster Faulkner being the in-house replacement for Todd Monken, the guy they're grooming to take over as the offense coordinator at Georgia. And he got the offense coordinator job somewhere else. And, we don't really know what the plans are for Todd Monken in his future. Everyone assumes he's going to go either back to the NFL, whether it's as a head coach or as a coordinator, or he's going to go to another college place and be a head coach again. But we don't know. We don't know at all. And, Faulkner goes to Georgia Tech. So, are we setting up for a Mike Bobo offensive coordinating job in the next few years?
So first of all, congratulations to Buster Faulkner. I think he deserved a big, massive opportunity like this. I mean, granted, is Georgia Tech a great job? I don't know if it is or it isn't, but good for him. I'm glad he's able to get it. I think the way that Georgia Tech played to finish the season with Brent Key as their head coach, I think they showed some stability. I think Buster Faulkner has an opportunity to go in there. I think he does have enough of some cachet here recently to maybe pull a couple of the top kids in the state. I'm thinking about all the relationships he was able to form at Georgia with a lot of these young players. I don't know that he initially in this first recruiting class is able to pull some of those guys. I think it would be more difficult, but I think if he's able to do a good, if he's able to have some success in his first year, I think he's going to be able to do a good job. So first of all, congratulations to Buster Faulkner. Second of all, I don't think Todd Monken's leaving, and I know this is not a popular opinion. Everybody's like, "Oh, he gets restless. He wants to leave." I don't know that he's ever been in the situation where he's completely happy and he's gotten complete control. And I mean, imagine somebody with his skill set knowing that every single year Kirby and the rest of the staff is going to bring in the very best of the best talented players to run in his system. I mean, it's like a cheat code. I mean, it's like this is like him as the offensive coordinator at Georgia is like playing Madden on freshman or rookie or whatever. And then, him go like, let's say he goes to take a head coaching job somewhere else or an offensive coordinator. The worst would be an offensive coordinator job in the NFL because that's like playing Madden on like all Madden level. And it's like, you're not going to have the talent matchup in every single game. It's extremely difficult. Maybe he misses that challenge. I don't know. I think Todd Monken is going to stay here until he's done coaching. That's just my opinion. And I know I am in the minority with that. But if you brought Mike Bobo in as the offensive coordinator, which, we've talked about this before, is back at Valdosta State, Kirby, Muschamp, and Bobo had an agreement that eventually one day they would all be on the same staff together. Now, Kirby has made that dream come true and has happened. But he didn't make Muschamp the defensive coordinator. He is the co-defensive coordinator, but he's not the outright defensive coordinator. Would he make Bobo the OC? Maybe he would, and probably he would. But then again, Georgia's also arguably the top 2 or 3 jobs in college football, and I don't think it would be hard to pull a top-notch offensive coordinator in here to run this offense. Who wouldn't want that opportunity? So I don't know that that's 100% going to happen. But again, I don't think we even need to discuss it because I don't think Monken's going to leave, at least not in the near future. And again, I know I'm in the minority, and if he leaves next year, I'm sure you all will come back and say, "Oh, Dan, you're an idiot." And maybe I am. I just think he's going to stay.
I can maybe not this year. Monken leaves. If the right job's not out there, he won't leave. But I do think eventually he will leave. I don't believe Muschamp and Bobo will be leaving anytime soon. Because if they wanted to go somewhere else, they could easily go somewhere else. I think they're Georgia guys. They're going to stay here. They're going to want to, they want to help build something, and they want to win national championships in the very end, grand scheme of things. And I think Georgia's their best opportunity to do that alongside their best friend. So with that being said, Dan, let's get back to no longer talking about the hypotheticals. Oh, wait. Rude says, hell no, Bobo. Good at helping and still smart, but his play style is too old, Mr. I formation and pistol. Well, Rude's, it's interesting you say that, and I think that's why a lot of people are turned off by Bobo. But the one big argument, credit to Bobo, first of all, the job he did back in the day when he was at Georgia as the offensive coordinator. He was scoring 30 points per game before it was really popular here in Georgia to score 30 points per game. But the one big thing I think a lot of people want to talk about in like a Mike Bobo scheme, or if he ever gets a offensive coordinator job at Georgia again, is, I think he's going to evolve. I don't think he would go back to the I formation. I don't think you're going to see a fullback again. But another thing you have to think about, and Dan has talked about this before, Georgia's never had the type of defenses that they have now. What would Mike Bobo look like? What would a Mike Bobo offense look like if, he had some belief in his defense that he didn't have to put up, touchdowns every single possession and have that pressure of having to go out and outright win a game? I think he's definitely evolved. I mean, heck, me and Dan were talking about on the phone before the show, kind of brainstorming some topics. Todd Monken even gave credit to Mike Bobo for the 2-point conversion play that they had. That was Bobo's idea. That was something Bobo passed down. So I think, being able to be around someone like Todd Monken, someone who was brought into the outside, into the program, I'm able to learn from that and learn from that experience. Even though Bobo is a very experienced guy by himself, I think that helps shape people. So, it's an interesting situation to look at. Zach says, I think if Monken does leave, they just go and get Faulkner back. I mean, maybe so. Maybe this is a proven opportunity for Faulkner. We don't know.
That's what I was going to say is I think, Zach, I don't know if that would or wouldn't happen. I don't know. But what a great opportunity for him to go test this, to see how well he can do it when he's calling the plays. And if he has a lot of success, that wouldn't shock me. I mean, how hard would it be to get him back? I don't think it would be very hard.
Not at
Unless he
all.
has a clause in his contract that he can't go back to Georgia.
And with that being said, for our last few topics, well, it's all one topic, but we have multiple points to hit in this. Dan, let's give out some Player of the Year awards. We got one for offense, we got one for defense, and I'm actually going to add in one, Dan. Overall Player of the Year. Can't have an MVP trophy. We need to have one big MVP trophy, and I don't know who exactly you're going to give it to, but Dan, let's start with offense. Offense has been kind of the name of the game for Georgia this year. A lot of possible people to pick from. I know the average Joe that's a Georgia fan, I know who they're going to pick. You know who they're going to pick. But Dan, who does Dan Kiley have as the offensive player of the year?
Okay, so honorable mention goes to Hot Pod because he saved our bacon more times than anybody else did, really. And I could go with any one of the players that you probably think. Darnell Washington is my 1A. I think Darnell Washington has done an amazing job this year, and I think he has completely changed the way that we look at him. I remember coming into the season, a lot of people said if he catches 5 balls, that's a lot. He's been completely unbelievable. But the offensive MVP of this team is SVP. What he's been able to do at the center position, I was never a huge fan of his. I didn't think he was that special, to be completely honest. And then Brooks was all about him. When Warren Erickson was the center, Brooks was like, SVP is better. SVP is better. He should be the starting center. And I was like, dang, Brooks, you hate Erickson. He's like, no, I don't hate Erickson. It's just SVP is special. This year, he completely took over the offensive line. He was in charge of all the calls. He did a fantastic job. Earlier in the comments, Rude says that this offensive line secretly became one of the top units in the country, and I 100% agree. And I think Cedric Van Pran Granger gets all the credit in the world for that because I think he is a stabilizing force, and he's done a great job. I think the leap that he made from last year to this year, because if you remember last year, a lot of the season we were making our calls from our tackle position, right? Because oh my gosh, his name just slipped my mind. The Jamari Sawyer was making most of the line calls, not SVP. This year it was him, and I know that's not the sexiest pick in the world, but you can't do anything if your offensive line isn't good. You just can't. And I think SVP is the offensive MVP this year. I really do. 100% I do.
That's a good pick. Someone I did not expect. I didn't expect Dan to give some credit to the boys up front, but glad it is. Got to show the big men some love. But Dan, I don't know if many will agree with me. I think it's been a conversation around Georgia and this year. But hey, my offensive player of the year is none other than Daijun Edwards. To me, Daijun Edwards has been the best back in Georgia's room. He's had the best year. I don't know if numbers statistically say that, but you look at when Daijun Edwards came in there, whether it was as the third string back or heck, even getting, most of the reps as the running back. I know he had a few fumbles this year. Daijun Edwards has been a physical runner. Was an underrated, overlooked prospect coming out of high school. Came to Georgia, came up with the Daijun, the Kirby Smart Death March or the Daijun Death March. Absolutely has took over this year. I think he's, caught a lot of attention just with the physical runs. Not the flashiest running backs. He's kind of similar to some of the pass running backs, some of those powerful running backs. Just impressive. Just impressive to watch him run. He'll get overlooked because, hey, he's playing next to Kenny McIntosh and Kendall Milton, two really good backs. By the way, Kendall Milton's had a great had a great SEC championship game. Really physical, really powerful. Look fast. Look faster than I've seen him this year. But hey, Daijun Edwards gets my offensive player of the year. Like Dan said, I think Darnell Washington deserves a lot of credit. But hey, I couldn't. Daijun Edwards really impressed me this year. I didn't expect him to look the way he did. So, Dan, with that being said, defensive player of the year, I think I know who you're going to pick.
Well, JDJ is probably the answer. But I'm just going to go Malachi Starks because that's my guy, and he completely helped transform the back end of that defense. And I don't think that Georgia has the type of success they have without having him back there, especially when Dan Jackson went down. And Dan Jackson is a great story, and I've covered that kid, and I told you how outstanding he was in college or in high school and how proud I was of him at Georgia. But even if you were to ask Dan Jackson, he's not the athlete that Malachi Starks is. And his ability to play on the back end, I think, allowed Georgia to do a lot of things that we were worried that they wouldn't be able to do. Again, I think JDJ is probably the correct answer, but for me, it's Malachi Starks. I absolutely love the fact that he played early and often, and I am just beyond proud of what he's been able to do this season. And on top of that, he's just an amazing kid. On a personal level, he's just an amazing kid. And I'm so happy for him and the success that he had. And I'm glad that he's found success at Georgia.
All right, this was a hard one for many reasons. Like Dan said, Jamon Dumas Johnson has a strong case. Smil Munden has a strong case. But hey, Dan picked one safety. I'm going with the other, Christopher Smith. I think Christopher Smith had a great year. My man Jay Will on Twitter timeline, blowing it up with some Chris Smith love. I believe it was this morning or yesterday. He's correct. Chris Smith has had a hell of a year. Hell of a 2 years. I could even put him in the category of the biggest surprise of the year. I didn't think he was going to play as well as he did. I mean, he's put himself in a position where he could be a top 60 draft pick, in my opinion. He's just that good. Him and Malachi Starks, I wish they had another year together. They've been a pretty good pairing on the back end in that defense, helped their corners out a lot. Was really excited to watch him this year. He's put on. He showed that he can go play in the NFL. I mean, nothing says it more than watching him go and blow up I believe it was against LSU. I guess it was like a screenplay, something like that. He came in, maybe covered 10 yards in the span of a few seconds, tackled the guy for a loss. Like just a Lewis Scene type play. Christopher Smith, incredible in coverage. He can play a little bit of man coverage and put him out. He can even play a star. Incredible. Another one I think that deserves a shout out here on this defense has been Javon Ballard, stepping in as that star role. Played exceptional down the stretch there. Played a really big role in Georgia's game plan against Tennessee. A lot of names to cover there. So, hey, shout out to both the safeties. Really impressive years. And I'm excited for Dan. I'm excited for everybody that we get to watch Malachi Starks for 2 more years.
2 more years.
So, with that being said, Dan, before we get to the MVP, before we get to that, biggest surprise of the year.
Oh, there's only one answer. And if you answer anything other than whatever, Brett Thorson. Brett Thorson is the biggest surprise of the year. He had never played a competitive football game in his entire life. He gets a scholarship to Georgia from living in Australia. I don't even think he'd ever been to the United States before coming here to Georgia. He shows up here and he is one of the best punters in the country as a freshman. I mean, the guy in the Tennessee game boots a 70-something yard punt down to the 1 yard line that completely changes the complexity of that football game. I mean, how could you pick anybody else? The guy had never played a football game before, and he's at the University of Georgia starting as a freshman. I got nothing for you. Okay, Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint comes back and he makes a couple nice plays. That's a surprise. I got Darnell Washington being a bigger part of the offense. Maybe that's a surprise, but it's Brett Thorson, and I don't think it's close.
Well, dang, I'm gonna go against the grain here. I got
Force, trust me, bro.
I got Nazir Stackhouse here. He's been incredible in the middle of Georgia's D line. Hard shoes to cover. I mean, hard shoes to fill. He has to replace Jordan Davis as one of Georgia's nose tackles. Jordan Davis, a first-round pick, top 15 draft pick. He has to help replace Devontae Wyatt, a first-round pick. Has to help replace Trayvon Walker. They play 2 different positions, first-round pick. But hey, he stepped in and he's affected games in a big way. You go watch him on tape. He's impressive. He's clogging up the run game. May not have the statistics that many will look to, but hey, he's played at a really high level for Georgia down the stretch. Been incredibly important on this Georgia's defense. But hey, like Dan said, Brett Thorson, 1A, 1B. I mean, even Darnell Washington could be counted as a surprise just with the plays he's made all year long. Javon Ballard, another really great surprise. Another guy that's been overlooked, had a great year. A lot of guys that can win this, but I think those two are really excellent options. Really good segment right there, in my opinion. If you ask me, I think those have been by far 4 of just some really great have had really great years.
There is one other person who deserves a lot of credit for the biggest surprise, and it's Michael Williams, the defensive lineman. I guess he's defensive end, whatever. But Michael Williams has been outstanding, and I mean it to get that level of production from a freshman at that position is tough. So I just wanted to throw his name out there so it wasn't getting overlooked. And the only reason you picked Dejon is because it sounds like Bijan Robinson.
That is a lie. But Dejon's been. I mean, shoot.
I'm just kidding. You don't have to justify it. I just wanted to.
I probably could have put him as my biggest surprise because I didn't expect him to play like he did down the stretch for Georgia. So with that, Dan, overall team MVP, who is it, Dan?
So I mean, you could say Jalen Carter because I mean, for God's sakes, he is probably arguably the best player in college football. Period. And I want to give a lot of credit to Nolan Smith because I think he played really, really well. And then on top of that, once he got injured, he was on the sidelines every game and he was in everybody's ear and he was helping. I mean, I don't want to say coaching, but coaching up the guys and being there, an emotional type of guy. But the answer is Stetson Bennett, whether you like him, love him, hate him, despise him, whatever the case may be, the team loves him. They respond to him. He's their emotional leader. He is their leader. And this team doesn't do what it did this year, I don't think, without Stetson Bennett. I think it's very hard as a football team to not go out there and perform your best or to sulk or to pout when you have a guy who is a former walk-on that was, for lack of a better term, shit on at every turn. And whether it be from our fan base, coaches, whatever the case may be, like Kirby said there in the Heisman speech, like every time he would emerge, we would say he's not good enough. And then he would go out there and prove us wrong. And I think when you have a guy like that in the locker room, it's extremely difficult to feel bad for yourself when you see everything that guy's been through. It's a Disney movie that nobody wants to watch because it would be a horrible Disney movie, right? Because you're like, oh my gosh, this is like so over the top. There's no way it's true. But it is. It's a true story. And, I've come around on Stetson 100%. Like I was 100% in that group where I wanted JT to play. And then, I mean, the team spoke. And when the team tells you who they want, you got to go with that guy. And, it's Stetson.
To relate to the NFL, like you said, I think Mike White and Zach Wilson are in that situation with the New York Jets. Team spoke. They want Mike White. You go look at that locker room, Mike White's won it over in that situation. Stetson Bennett's done the same. He's the unanimous MVP. That's why he's in there right now. That's why I have it right there, unanimous, because I ain't going to go against it. A little shocked that Dan picked Stetson, but Dan's not a hater. Dan's not a Stetson Bennett hater. Dan's never been. Dan's been, I wouldn't even say Dan's been a critic. I would say Dan's just realistic in his expectations. Kind of cancels out some of the overtop expectations that a lot of us have or the unrealistic opinions. But yeah, Stetson Bennett's played at an exceptionally high level this year. He's going to catch a lot of flack because, like Dan said, he's a former walk-on. And, it's just it's just low-hanging fruit to bag on Stetson Bennett. But hey, he's played at an exceptional level. Showed up in the biggest of games, which, let's be honest here. If it wasn't for those 4 games against 4 ranked opponents, I don't think he would be in the Heisman conversation. He wouldn't have finished in the top 10. That's where he showed up. That's where he played. That's where Georgia let him loose. And when they let him loose, by God, nobody stopped him. So, unanimous MVP, my opinion, he's going near the top of the list. He is at the top of the list, in my opinion, of best quarterback that Georgia's had since Aaron Murray. Aaron Murray's, in my opinion, Dan, probably top 2 all time for Georgia.
Well, Aaron Murray was my number 1, the greatest Georgia quarterback of all time, but he says it's Stetson Bennett. So if Aaron Murray, the guy who I thought was the best quarterback to play at Georgia, I'm talking about just in terms of Georgia's success. I'm not talking, I obviously know who Matthew Stafford is. I get it. Matthew Stafford's unbelievable. He's the most talented quarterback Georgia's ever had. Maybe Fran Tarkenton. It might still be Fran, but but Stetson wins it.
Yeah.
Fran Tarkins is an NFL Hall of Famer, for God's sakes.
It's tough. The all-time debate about who's most talented and all that, it's tough. But yeah, Stetson Bennett has put himself at a level of prominence that It's going to be hard to overcome. Alabama fans will like to say, "Oh, he's just our version of AJ McCarron." No, miss me with that. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for today, guys. Next week, we're going to be talking about bowl games because it's bowl season, baby. In my opinion, the best time of the year because, hey, any given day, not just any given Saturday, any given day, you can go watch a good football game. Hey, I do want to put out there next Tuesday, 7:30, right here on this YouTube channel. You can watch the Top Talk podcast with Dan Kiley and myself, Harrison Reno. Make sure to follow Dan Kiley on Twitter at Dan Kiley3. Follow me at Harrison Reno. Whew, we're getting close, Dan. Really, really close to Georgia, Ohio State. Another
next weekend's next Tuesday's episode is going to be a lot of fun. We're not going to get heavy into the Georgia Ohio State talk. That's going to be the following week. We're going to go through some bowl games next week. We're going to have some fun. We want all of you to get in here, tell your friends, get in the comments because this can be user friendly, interactive. We want your feedback. We're going to have fun talking bowl games. Just kind of like a chill week. Maybe not as much Georgia content as you're expecting. It's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of different bowl games. Which games we want to see? Which games we could do without? Maybe we'll get some prop bets going in there. So bring your friends, come in here. We want to be user friendly. We want to be interactive with you guys. So please show up, be here in our next show because we want your feedback on these bowl games. Okay, guys?
I will just go ahead and put this out there. I haven't run this by Dan, but I was thinking about it pre-show and screw it. We're going to let people come on. I'm going to put the link in the comments for everybody who shows up. If you want to jump on the show, the link's going to be in the description.
Roots has got to be on. Roots has been begging, so.
Roots, Zach, I expect y'all two to show up. Hey, maybe if our friend Jeremiah Stoddard shows up, maybe he'll hop on with us, get a little four-wide action as we did for Dan's biggest surprise that we've had on the show. So,
Roots, you better show up. You're going to be on the show.
We're just going to have it for the people that watch the show. Not going to put it on Twitter, not going to put it on Facebook. It's just going to be, but if you know basis, people are going to be able to join the show. So that's going to wrap it up for episode 68. We have a big episode 69 coming up next week, guys. It's bowl season. Enjoy the ending to college football season because in a few short weeks, we're going back to the offseason. That's going to wrap it up. I'm Harrison Reno. That's Dan Kiley. We'll see you next week.